number 2.
Number 2.
Okay. You want to go first? Or want me to go first?
Well, I mean...
I'm going to let you go first because mine's is going to shock you. But go ahead.
At this point, I only got 2 left to choose from, right?
Yeah.
I have WandaVision, and I have Captain America and Falcon Winter Soldier.
Mm-hmm.
So, my number 2 is WandaVision.
Okay.
And I think it speaks volumes because, for one, it was the first show right out of the gate on Disney Plus, right?
It was, yes.
It surprised, I think, a lot of people because it was so different.
Yes. And
because it was so different, it frustrated a lot of people. I think a lot of people were expecting, I'm going to put on this show, and it's going to be an hour-long MCU film that I get to watch each week, and it's going to make a lot of sense, and it's going to have...
superheroes fight and
they're going to fight, and Wanda's going to come in, and Vision, and they're just going to beat stuff up, and I'm going to be able to watch this, and it's going to make sense, and oh my god, what am I watching? This is a 1950s show.
Yeah, this is opposite.
And
I don't
nothing
understand,
is happening.
Yeah,
I don't understand
anything.
But meanwhile, slowly in each episode, there is just a slight blip or a glitch, and it's just disseminating and breaking down, and you have to sit there and wait for everything to talk about a long game, and Marvel doing a long game.
I think out of the shows, WandaVision was the best long game.
Yes. Yeah. And I think it was the most intelligently and most sophisticated, and I think probably thought-provoking show of all of them. Next to my number 1 that I'm going to... Obviously, at this point, you can figure out what my number 1 is, but...
and I definitely... Me and you have the same number 1. I definitely felt each show had a different journey.
It did.
And I felt Wanda's journey was a little bit different from my next journey, right? And I give my number 2 to Hawkeye. Okay? And... everybody thinks that the show is Kate Bishop's show. But it's the journey of Hawkeye, right? Coming to terms with losing Natasha, right? Going through the motions of losing his hearing, right? What I love beautifully about Hawkeye was we got the Matt Fraction run, where he takes Kate Bishop under his wing, right? And there was so much in the show where it was like copy to paste. They changed some of the wording and they changed some of the contrast in there. The banter about boomerang arrows, all of that is out of that run, right? We got to see Lucky, the one-eyed pizza dog. We got to see the Tracksuit Mafia. I remember before the show started, myself and Katana was talking about the show, about who's the possible bad guy, big bad guy. And I said, Wilson Fisk. And he was like, why Fisk? We haven't seen Fisk since the Netflix series, right? I don't think it's going to be. I said, it has to be Fisk. There was a rumor floating around many months out, and then they confirmed, right, that Alaqua Cox was going to be in the Hawkeye series as Maya Lopez, right? When D23 came out 2 months before they premiered Hawkeye, there was a show called Echo. And I said to Katano, I said, if there's going to be a show called Echo, Hawkeye, it is going to have many moving pieces, and one of them is going to be Maya's story. Right? And a lot of people had seen her and don't even realize that she's going to become Echo. And I said, if they are going to be telling an Echo story, which they are more than likely going to build to, the big bad has to be Kingpin.
Exactly. Because it sets up her long game of having to deal with Kingpin. The only difference was, instead of Hawkeye saying, your boss hired me or tipped me off about your dad, why I killed your dad in the mix, right? The only difference was that in the comics, Daredevil is the one who tells her. But I didn't like the whole Kate Bishop thing. And that, that was a driving sore spot for me, right? I love the fact that we got to see Yelena again in a different atmosphere again. And now she has a different purpose, right? But it's in the craziness of Hawkeye that we realize that when Natasha beat Clint to sacrifice herself,
she was not just fighting to bring his family back for him, but her sister back. Because she knew her sister had disappeared, got dusted away as well. So it's in that moment where she's sitting there talking to Clint, and she does the whistle about to kill him, and he whistles back. And now Clint has to tell her, she was my best friend. She told me everything. And because she was my best friend and we have had these conversations, is why I wouldn't have let her just die. Right? But I wanted to sacrifice myself. And you know her. She has to win. She always do. So she had to be better than me. And she beat me. And she killed herself. And there's nothing we can do. And it's in that moment that you get to see the clarity behind of why Natasha was like, I have to do this. And for me, that, along with the banter of Kate Bishop and Yelena, right? Where we get to see another element or the passing of the torches while they're still buddy cop between the other Black Widow and the new Hawkeye, right?
The macaroni conversation?
The macaroni conversation. Yeah. You know, like all these things. And then she says to her, when she gets up to leave, she says, thank you for girls' night. Like, and it's like, it's only in that moment, like, when you go back and you watch Avengers 1, and the banter between Hawkeye and Clint, Hawkeye and Black Widow, after she kind of kicked him and snapped him back or whatever, and they sitting there talking about he's going to put an arrow in Loki's eye or whatever, and they talking, and you realize, yeah, there's a very close bond here between these two characters, and you watching it formulate over here.
I did think one of the coolest moments in the show was the exchange between Clint and Kate, where Clint says to Kate, the most important shot I took was a shot I never took. Yeah. And then how in that same exact episode she ends up not taking the shot on Yelena, which pretty much sets up the next mantle for both of them, right? And like, I feel like that is probably overlooked by most fans who are just watching it and didn't see that. So yes, I do agree there were beautiful moments, and I know I've ranked it so low.
Yeah. Believe it or not,
so I have a question for you. See, now we're talking about it.
Okay.
Because it bothered me. Well, how did you feel about the scene where they were just firing off every trick arrow after every trick arrow, continuously for what felt like forever?
I love the fact that, first of all, we got to see...
I like the PIM technology. I like the Stark technology. I liked everything leading up until that scene. But how did you actually feel about that scene? Because I'm not talking about the Yelena and Clint scene, because that was beautiful, and I will give the nod to that. I'm talking about the actual fight scene, which was supposed to be like the grand hurrah, because I'll have my opinion after yours. Okay. I'm curious.
I felt that was rushed a little bit.
Okay.
That was very rushed, right?
Okay.
I love the fact that they had trick arrows, and anybody who have followed Clint, aka Hawkeye, in the comics knows that he has a lot of trick arrows.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So seeing those trick arrows and how they executed them on the screen I thought was beautifully done. However, that whole scene where they pop in all these arrows, and it's supposed to be a while that they pop in these arrows, but it's really like only like 45 seconds to a minute. It was very rushed.
And I also thought, okay, so I get it. You guys are expert marksmen, but you're also literally not covered whatsoever. You're not moving, and you're just standing in the same spot. I thought they could have been using the trick arrows while still maybe moving through a scene of some nature, showing how they are agile, because most of the time when they're fighting, I mean, I've seen Clint do it plenty of times with Natasha. They're moving through some sort of scape of some nature. They're in a city. Yeah. They could have been using these trick arrows off of different not cliff tops, but they're in the city. Skyscraper tops or building tops of some nature. I don't know. I just felt like it was like, okay, I get it. You're in this very iconic situation in New York where you have the Christmas tree and you're in that picturesque scene in New York City, but I just felt it was almost too gimmicky, in my opinion. And last episode, I think that's what did it for me. I loved everything about Hawkeye, and then the last episode really made me just go, oh. And I think that's what did it for me, because I would have put this whole series that much further up the ladder on this ranking system.
These things.
If I had these things probably executed just a little bit better, because I was like, oh my god. When they previewed Vincent D'Onofrio's Kingpin, the previous episode, I was like, mind freaking blown. Here we go. Like, this is going to be epic. And then when I started seeing the technology, the PIM arrow tips, and them building, I'm like, oh my god, this is going to be epic. And then it just all happened.
If they had given me 15 minutes solid of popping arrows and doing a lot of stuff
through something else, so I don't know.
think because of the time frame that they had, I think a lot of things got cut and they had to squeeze it in.
Again.
And because they did that, they rushed that.
Yeah. So that was my personal qualm. And now looking at it, I had to be that last episode, I think, is what did it for me. Because everything else, I know you and I were going back and forth plenty of times, like, oh man, that last episode, what they've been doing for Natasha's story. And I hate for all those fans of the Black Widow movie, I felt like this did way more justice
to
for
the Black Widow
Natasha
story,
and the Black Widow story than the Black Widow movie did. And that speaks volumes for it, but it just felt like it fell so short. It's like running this amazing marathon, and they just was like, yeah, that's the finish line.
Definitely.
I'm done.
Definitely.
I don't know. It just fell short for me.
Definitely the last episode fell a little short. But I think because of the build-up and all the things that we saw in there, it still pushed it to number 2 for me.
Okay.
Even though we start off with the Matt Fraction run, right? The show ends with the family business run.
Yeah, that's true. I mean,
right?
he is
even down to exactly what Kingpin was
I was going to say, Kingpin's attire. He had the Hawaiian shirt.
Hawaiian shirt.
Which, as goofy it kind of looked, I was like, oh, I know what they're doing with that. It was a little goofy.
And there was a lot of guys in the forum that was like, oh man, Kingpin would never wear that. And I'm like, no.
That's cover art. So.
Yeah. You know, shout out to my man Harlock19, my man Randy, a.k.a. Kingpin. Randy did that version of Kingpin. He cosplayed that version years ago. And it's because he's such a true fan of Wilson Fisk that, you know, he embodies Fisk in the way he looks, the way he dresses, and he has them all. And
you have to have all the wardrobe.
When I saw that, the first thing I did was I thought of Randy.
Yeah.
And Randy posted a picture that he had years ago. Like, yo, I did it first, and I'm like, respect.
Yeah,
because you're the OG Fisk.
Exactly,
you know?
Exactly.
So I felt like they took that right out of the book, even with the confrontation that ended with Maya, right? To where she pops him in the face. She's the one that shoots him in the face. Now, granted, we couldn't see that because it was Disney Plus. Right? But for the readers out there.
Speaking of which, though, how do you think that confrontation would have gone down if this took place in the Netflix universe?
Oh, he would have got popped. We would have seen some splatter. Because remember, in the comics, after that, he loses his vision.
Yeah.
Right? But then he goes and he rehabilitates and he goes to China or Japan. And he comes back, he got the sword and he just...
cutting.
And he retakes his mantle as the king of New York.
How would you think the conversation of Kate's mom talking to Kingpin would have went down on the Netflix series?
First of all, I think he would have took her head and put her head through the table.
Yeah.
First of all.
Right?
But I think she also has a purpose in all of this. I believe Kate's mom is Madame Mask.
You think so?
I think so. Kate Nemesis ends up becoming Madame Mask, right? But it's just in the comics, it's not her mom, because her mom is actually the one who gets killed and she's raised by her dad. Right? But I believe they are setting all of this up, right? That they're going to do something later on with her, and she will have to deal with her mom, and her mom is Madame Mask.
Okay.
That's what I'm seeing. I could be wrong, but if I'm not wrong, you heard it here first.
Right here.
So seeing all of that, like it end with the whole family business run with Maya and everything, and then the banter at the end when they burn the Ronin suit, and she's trying to get her name, and just like in the comics where she's trying to pick her name, and Hawkeye gives her the name.
Gives her Hawkeye, yeah.
And the show ends with him walking away saying, "I have an idea," and it goes off. I'm like, Boom. Mm-hmm. And all of those reasons why I push it to my number 2 spot.
Okay.
I felt like it was genius the way they executed it. There were some missed moments too. But I felt like there were also missed moments in my number 1.
Okay.
A.P.A.C.